Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Tuesday night edition of the program. We are live and national. Happy to be here. It's a blessing to be with you on this microphone. 7 minutes past the top of the hour, and we're live. So if you want to give me a call, feel free, 833-482-5337, 833-4Valdez. And forgive my ignorance, but somebody remind me, when we started getting into the business of elections and getting out if we thought we couldn't win. Right? Remember that? Remember the time that all those candidates dropped out because they thought they couldn't win, or because someone else thought they couldn't win, like a poll, right? I remember one candidate in particular, Donald J. Trump. All the polls said he was going to lose. All the polls. I think there might have been one. And kudos to the one who got it right. Hillary Clinton's up by double digits. Who remembers that? I do. I'm old enough to remember that stuff. And guess what? Nobody was saying, oh, just drop out of the race, just drop out of the race. And the reason this irks me the way it does is because imagine the precedent being set, right? You're a Republican, you're a Democrat, whichever one you want to be. You get your petitions, you run for office, right? Maybe you have a primary, maybe you don't. And then after somebody who runs in the primary loses, they just start to say, hey, look, you know what? You've always known that this communist was running. And nobody cared and nobody did anything to stop him before. But now that your golden child, Andrew Cuomo, didn't win and got trounced by Mamdani by 13 points in the primary, now it's time to refine and redefine the way that we do elections. Right? Now is the time for us to say, no, hold on, we're going to start calling for people to drop out of the race. And let alone, we're going to call for the Republican to drop out of the race. Well, Rich, come on, you're going overboard here. Listen, I know you guys are both radio colleagues, but no, it has nothing to do with that in actuality. It has to do with the fact that we're going to hand the mayoralty of the city of New York on the backs of people that campaigned for making this country better again, right? MAGA people are being asked to hand over to the grandma killer, the no cash bail Andy Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo is a horrible, horrible public official. I would pay money if there was. I don't even live in New York City anymore, but I go there enough. We have a studio there. I would pay money if they said, hey, look, on your next tax return, will you give X amount of money to keep Andrew Cuomo out of it? Absolutely, yes. This man cost a lot of people a lot of money, not to mention all the lawsuits. Listen, he's no good. But anyway, the point is, when did this become the new formula? Hey, if we're going to get a communist, then all bets are off. We throw democracy out the window. We throw our constitutional republic out the window. We throw everything out the window because, shoot, that guy is a communist. He's an Islamist sympathizer. Everybody who's freaking out right now, shame on you for not doing more. Shame on you for not doing more to stop him and not taking the threat seriously, right? I'm going to call them Joe Crowleys because that's what they're doing. They're doing the Joe Crowley. AOC came and she said, I'm going to run as a Democrat socialist and I'm going to tell the truth about everything. And she said, I want this and I want that and I believe in this and I believe that, right? Remember she said, well, I believe because of the current Israeli occupation. Remember when she said that? And everybody, Margaret Brennan and others, Margaret Hoover rather, Everyone was freaking out. No way. Oh, we can't take. Nobody took her seriously. Here she is, I don't know, 3-4 terms later. Hasn't passed a single piece of legislation, and she's one of the most influential and highest fundraising people in Congress. Imagine that. Because Joe Crowley, the second or third guy in command back then in the under Pelosi, didn't take her seriously. So now, Andrew Cuomo, who doesn't campaign, thinks he's just going to show up and live off his family name because his father was governor, and he was a cabinet member of Bill Clinton. Now, all of a sudden, the MAGA world is expected to just vote for Andrew Cuomo. So now we're supposed to vote for the deep state. We're voting for nepotism. Come on. Not here, not today, not ever. Sometimes you got to make your bed and you got to lie in it. I'm not going to take out a good guy. I'm not going to put the good guy, Curtis Sliwa, the guy who has the right ideas, the guy whose heart's in the right place, the guy who actually could pull this off, the guy that actually has crossover appeal. Democrats and Republicans like him. We're going to tell that guy to get out of the race? You've got to be kidding me. Anyway, always got to make sure I hit that at least once per hour because, honestly, I'm beside myself with so many of my, not so many, honestly, I think it's like 4 people, right? By and large, everybody I've spoken to is amazed that some of the people with a platform to make this kind of noise are making this noise. You know, I'm not amazed that the New York Post editorial board isn't behind Sliwa, because I understand that there's some corporate interest there and whatnot, and they're supposed to be independent, but I understand. It's the New York Post editorial board. They don't get everything right. But in a situation like this, you just got to say, hold on a second, because a few people that have mass appeal are saying something doesn't mean that that's what's going on. I can tell you right now from the people I've spoken to, I think every single county chair, Republican county chair in New York, Brooklyn, Queens, every county, they're with Curtis. They stand by their candidate. You know why? Because they're not standing by a candidate and they're not standing by Curtis. They're standing by the system. The system that says if you run for office as a Republican, we're going to see it through until Election Day. We're not going to have people, whether because of their wealth or because of their influence or because of their owning a newspaper or anything like that, getting involved in trying to sway the will of the people, to take away the opportunity of a person who wants to vote for Curtis Sliwa, especially when there's a debate tomorrow. So this is about principle. This is not about ego. This is not about can we win. You know how you win? You win on Election Day. And if you're not, you lose. That's how elections work. I think we've all been through them before. All right, we continue. Now, what's next? Rare earths. President Trump yesterday, as I mentioned briefly yesterday, had a conversation with the Prime Minister of Australia to push China out of the rare earths conversation. Brilliant move, good chess move by El Trompito, Donaldus Magnus, the 45th and 47th president of these United States. Because you got to do that, right? You have to constantly play chess to make sure that you're staying ahead. And honestly, few are as good at this as Trump. I can't think of another one that's as good as Trump in this lifetime. But I'm trying to leave a margin for error here. But absolutely good move. He needs to keep doing it. I think he's been doing it. Now the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is coming to town to meet with El Trompito. Another good move. Little by little, developing these alliances. This doesn't mean I like what you do. It doesn't mean I'm your best friend. It means I think that there is something for the United States to benefit here from, and let's make a deal. And like Seinfeld used to say, right now Trump has hand. As Trump likes to say, he's got the cards. And I think that's a wonderful thing. So we're going to talk about these rare earths in that conversation straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
What should we take away from this meeting with the Prime Minister of Australia that has not, it's been a long time coming. It has not happened until now.
Yeah, that's right. A fairly warm meeting between two men from opposite ends of the political spectrum here. The president and the prime minister announcing what I'm told by a White House official is a $3 billion joint venture project to develop critical minerals between these two countries that they believe could yield $50 billion in these minerals, which would become kind of a key piece of the economic puzzle here for President Trump, elements that are necessary for so many high-tech businesses in the United States. It relates to what was, I think, the third country present in this room, the United States' relationship with China. The president, to me, my ear, Kate, going to great lengths to not antagonize Chinese President Xi, suggesting that he believes, despite the back and forth over trade and a lot of kind of mutual economic saber rattling, that he does ultimately think there'll be good trade deals to be done with China, that there'll be a deal to get the Chinese to purchase American soybeans again, and that all of this will kind of work out fine despite the ratcheting up of economic pressure between the world's two largest economies. If not, that brings us back to the Australia partnership, where you heard the president and the prime minister talking about the sales of U.S. nuclear-powered submarines to the Australians, the suggestion that this military alliance between the United States and Australia, which goes back to World War I, could continue to be beneficial for both countries, buying American planes, American military technology, and so forth, which, from the Australian perspective, is partly about containing China.
That's NBC's Garrett Hakey, and I want to get into this conversation a little bit deeper with our guest. Our guest is Drew Horn. He is a former Associate Director of Policy in the Office of the Vice President, former official in the Department of Energy and Defense during the first Trump administration. He's now the CEO of GreenMet, and he's here with us now. Drew Horn, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. So you just heard, this report from NBC News, and we heard some of the clips from President Trump's meeting with Prime Minister Albanese, and this, on its face, seems like a very, very promising deal to marginalize China and to streamline America's access to rare earth minerals. I want to get your thoughts on it, and then the larger play.
Yeah, so I guess I'd say that I think it is a monumental deal. It's a huge agreement between the United States and Australia that needed to happen. It's been, many months in the making, as the president said. It's going to allow the United States and Australia, I believe, to lead the world in the critical minerals arena and sectors. And I think that's what's needed, really allow free market competition to actually sort of take over what's been kind of an artificial chokehold that the Chinese have had on the sector. And I think it's all very positive.
Let's talk about how sweeping it is, because it's obviously cutting the Chinese off. Great. But let's talk about how many industries are affected here, because you're talking about, military, defense, general technology. It seems pretty far reaching.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that rare earths and critical minerals are literally in every single component of everything we use in all aspects of our lives. So you're talking, obviously, everything from your iPhone to F-35s to spacecraft to technology devices of any variety, computers, AI, everything really. So we're talking about the bedrocks of our current and future society, honestly, here.
Now, let's talk about, what's coming down the pipe, how this plays into other arrangements that we can have with Australia on energy and national security and other implications.
Well, I'd say that obviously energy is the future with the AI and technological boom right now. The needs for energy are just going to always keep increasing. That's going to be one of the key national security considerations, is access and availability of energy. And so I think the idea that the United States and Australia, who are two leaders in multiple sectors, can continue to collaborate, to partner, to build upon a longstanding allied relationship of mutual support, it's going to allow us to demonstrate an alternative to the Chinese and Russian options that are out there that have currently been kind of holding a lot of different sectors in an unnecessary amount of negative leverage.
Now, Drew, as I understand it, you helped put some part of this meeting together. Tell us more.
So I have been privately helping with all of these efforts. I no longer work for the government. I had the pleasure of being a senior appointee in the last administration working on this subject when it was really starting to come to work continually with many different Australian companies working towards this collective goal of U.S.-Australian collaboration privately to support a lot of these public policy objectives and goals. And so we have a large amount of U.S. capital that's looking to come in to support and scale up this series of U.S. Australian minerals processing, mining, and manufacturing projects, if you will.
And what would you say were some of the hurdles that prevented this from happening in the past?
I think the biggest thing is that this just hasn't been prioritized until it was so obviously the main issue of our time. I've been working on this particular subject for, probably about the last 10 years pretty dedicatedly. And honestly, people didn't think it was an issue worthwhile of that level of focus until just the last several years when, the Chinese started doing their sort of long telegraphed punch of choking off Western supply in various elements. And we kind of knew they always had this leverage that they would use it to try and exert control and influence in a negative way. And as it started playing out, I think everyone's kind of woken up to the fact that this is essential to our very existence and anything we want to do in the future. And so therefore it needs to be that primary focus. And so I think that's what really allowed this deal to actually come together.
And for everybody that's listening that wants to learn more about the work that you're doing at GreenMet, how do they follow you and how do they learn more?
Yeah, well, so you can follow me on social media. I'm relatively easy to find, but you can also just go to greenmet.com. That's greenmet.com, and you can kind of follow all of our public announcements and interactions and deal focus there.
Outstanding. Well, as this stuff continues to develop, I look forward to having some other conversations with you. Looks like this is just the beginning of a whole lot more when it comes to mining and expanding energy, and seems like just a great time for the American economy and the American energy boom that is to come.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's a real Rockefeller moment, and I think this is just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak.
Outstanding. Folks, Drew Horn, the CEO of GreenMet. He served as Associate Director of Policy in the Office of the Vice President, Vice President Pence during Trump 1.0. And happy to have this conversation with you, brother. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much.
You bet. And amigos, we are going to get to your calls, thoughts, and opinions straight ahead. But something else I wanted to bring up is, I'm sorry, brain fart, forgive me. This stuff with Ukraine, right? Things seem to be up and down, up and down. Now Putin's got this whole new thing going on. And I want to get into that. Maybe not right now, but I want to just put it out there. I think this is a conversation that we have to have because it doesn't seem to be going well, right? And President Trump, I thought, made it really clear that the killing has to end. And it seems like both sides here really just zero regard for their own people, happy to throw everybody to the wolves, or as President Trump put it, the meat grinder. And not a good look. Anyway, I'm going to continue with what's going on. John Brennan referred for criminal indictment. Comey, will he skate? Will he go? We're going to do a little bit on that. I got a few things up my sleeve. Keep it locked right here, folks. Rich Valdez, we continue. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
After the guest leaves every night and we're doing open phones, kind of at the heartbeat of America. You sit there in this radio studio and suddenly you hear voices. Mobile, Dallas, New York, Miami. And there's kind of a conglomeration of America all in one room.
Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez keeping you company, live and national. And our phone number, you heard it, 833-4-VALDEZ. Before we get to your calls, I want to go over a couple of things, right? A little bit of the geopolitical stuff. J.D. Vance, vice president, haven't had enough coffee today. Vice President J.D. Vance is in Israel today. And he had a lot of things to say, and we'll get to some of this now, some of it later. But the part I want to get to now is really the part about him harping on the media. And I think this is so important. It's so important because I think oftentimes we don't keep the pressure on trying to have a fair media. Forget about honest, just fair, right? Just, tell the story. Even if you're going to put your spin on it, tell the story. And this is, it's so sad but true that you really do have like a bunch of cheerleaders, leftist cheerleaders that can't wait for the demise, not of Trump, not of J.D. Vance, not of anything, but actually of our country. And they don't realize it, right? This is Israel. So they're like, whatever, we'll destroy Israel. But they don't realize that the everlasting effect is the erosion of so much of what we know in America. Really is, in my opinion. I mean, man, it's as if they wake up and I understand it. The Marxists, in their heart, what they love is revolution. And many of them have, kind of gone to the Fabians school and realized, all right, we'll do it by changing institutions without revolution, right? We'll become the media. We'll become the government. We'll become academia. And they've gone to take over these institutions in our society to bring about their revolution without having a revolution. And they call it socialism or progressivism. But the reality is it's nothing more than warmed over communism. This is what the Marxist desires. But in my opinion, in their heart of hearts, they truly desire chaos. They truly desire to bring down what is so they can rebuild what they wish to see. This Marxist utopia where the government does everything for everyone, where there are no more billionaires, except for, those that serve in government, perhaps, right? Like you see in Cuba, like you see in Venezuela, like you see in lots of places. China, or as El Trompito says, China. It's this that they are hell-bent on. It's literally the proverbial cutting off your nose to spite your face. Anyway, listen to Vice President Vance and his wise words in Israel Today, 15.
The Israeli government has been remarkably helpful in this. I want to thank them, thank our Israeli partners, and all the folks particularly who are working hand in hand with their American friends here at the CMCC. And number two, I want to say that there is this weird attitude I've sensed in the American media and the Western media where there's almost this desire to root for failure, that every time something bad happens, that every time that there's an act of violence, there's this inclination to say, oh, this is the end of the ceasefire, this is the end of the peace plan. It's not the end. It is, in fact, exactly how this is going to have to happen when you have people who hate each other, who have been fighting against each other for a very long time. We are doing very well. We are in a very good place. We're going to have to keep working on it, but I think we have the team to do exactly that. So with all thanks to our partners, both in Israel, but all across the Gulf Arab states, Indonesia, the Turks, we are doing an amazing thing here, and I'm particularly proud of the American troops working at the command center who are coordinating this effort and making it possible.
Again, Vice President Vance in Israel Today. Excellent job, right? He's telling the truth there. And it's so important that the media stop rooting for the failure of this. And listen, I've never been involved in creating world peace or even regional world peace like peace in the Middle East or anything like that. But I can tell you that I would bet that it is very, very intricate, right? Because I, like many of you, have had a girlfriend and a wife. Not at the same time. I'm just saying, at different times. And I know what it's like to argue and negotiate with someone that you're at odds with. And I'm simplifying this because I think most people can relate to how difficult it is to be in the presence of someone that you're in active conflict with. And these are people that you love. Now, imagine when you're trying to broker a deal between people that hate each other. And one of those groups of people are terrorists, right? That have used terrorism to make their point, to make their case, to have a founding document, Hamas, that says that they stand for the annihilation, the eradication, the elimination of Israel. I mean, this is pretty remarkable stuff. So you've got to imagine that just like there are disagreements in everything, right? Whether it's political parties, political movements, whatever, there's always going to be somebody that says, well, I don't agree with that. I have a different perspective. In this case, they say, I don't agree with that. I'm going to go execute people in the streets. And we don't know who these people are and how extensive it is. And we've heard some feedback on this, both from the White House and the administration and from guests on this program, that just last night, right, former U.S. Special Envoy Eli Kohanim said there are bumps in the road. And listen, I get that. I think if you have a job, most people, you've hit bumps in the road in your job. I think situations like this are no different, although the stakes may be higher and there's lives on the line. I get that, and I don't mean to trivialize it. But I realize that I don't think we could turn around and say, oh, that's it, they're killing people again, it's over. The war's full-blown war again. No, these people are committed to peace, and the way you know, they've given up their leverage. Yes, Netanyahu is hell-bent on getting every last hostage, including the remains of the ones that are deceased, which is the only thing left. But I will say, and forgive me for saying this, because I don't mean any disrespect to those that have perished, but they are gone. And I pray they get their family members and their remains back. I really do. But it's not comparable to saying, hey, I'm holding someone that is emaciated. I'm holding a prisoner that I've been starving. And if you don't do this, we're going to do that. They don't have that leverage anymore. They've given up all of their cards. Or as they say in Seinfeld, their hand. They have no upper hand here. They have no hand at all. So if they have no hand, then guess what? They're in the game. It makes sense for them. Now, I've heard other analysis that we've played on this program where they say, you know what, these guys might be in it for the long break, 10 or 15 years of truce, not necessarily peace because they don't believe in peace with their enemies, but they may agree to stop fighting, to reposition themselves, to come back for their, global caliphate or whatever it is that they're trying to do later on. I get that. At this point, I think most of us would say 15 years of peace, 10 years of peace. Man, a week of peace sounds like a really good deal. So I realize that the amount of work that goes into something like this and that temperatures are high in these parts. So kudos to everybody involved, right? From President Trump to Secretary Rubio to Ambassador Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and everyone else that's involved. On the Israeli side as well as the Hamas side. That's honestly, it seems like they're trying to negotiate to not be annihilated. I get that. Hey, we want a win here. And the media can't get out of their own way, their America-hating way, to try and just constantly put the kibosh on this stuff. And that stuff is really what I guess irks me and was, obviously bothering the vice president. But I think it points to a bigger problem about this rot that we have, this leftist rot in our country. And the only way to fix that, change that, is for people to see. Recently, I had a conversation with somebody who I'm going to say probably doesn't really involve himself too much in politics, right? Works in his job and lives his life, raises his children, stays abreast of the news like everybody else. But he's not an active politician, as far as I know. He's not an activist of any kind. And he tells me, I think the Democrats have been lying to us for a very long time. And little by little, they're being exposed by Trump and this movement. And I said, yeah, I think that's a fact, 100%. And he went on to say to me something I thought was profound. And he said, you really can't see it until you get all the way out of the matrix. And I thought, That's truly brilliant because it's very true. As long as you are in this matrix, right, this situation that's been created for you, whether it's poverty, housing project, criminality, fatherless home, government dependence, right? And I don't mean government dependence like you live on welfare. I mean government dependence like my dad worked for the county, my grandfather worked for the state, literally dependent on the government for your paycheck, for your livelihood, for your health care. This government dependence, this is the tool that they use in these communist countries. That's whether you eat or don't eat, right? The people that are with Maduro, the yes men, they're there because of that. And in America, we call it a pension and a paycheck. And I'm not trying to disparage people that have served this country and worked in our government. But I am trying to say the Democrats have prostituted this. They've perverted this for their benefit, for their political power. And this is where the reform is needed. And this is why I think MAGA has been so successful, because the swamp truly has to be drained so that people can get out of this matrix. Anyway, it was just a great conversation. I wanted to share that with you. I'll be right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Look at Rich Valdez. He's now a radio host, and he's a great radio host.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We are going to go to your phone calls, 833-482-5337. You know, Open Phone America is a time-honored tradition on this program. Let me see. If I'm 47, I think that's how long ago it started, 46 years ago or something like that. Larry King, when he started this thing, where he took over actually from a guy named Long John Nebel. And he did this open phone thing with his 5-hour radio show that went into, I think it started at 9 or 10 o'clock at night and went all the way to like 1 or 2 in the morning. And it was a remarkable feat, honestly, at the time. And people were trying to sneak into the radio studio back then. Because remember, there was no internet, right? So if you wanted clout, there was no social media clout. There was let's get on with Larry King clout. And that continued for another 3 decades after he went on to television. And the late, great Jim Bohannon carried that torch for 30 more years. And now here, you and I, on the medium that they said, radio's doomed as soon as they invent that thing called a color television, or even the black and white television. Yet here we are, expanding in podcast numbers growing, ratings growing. I mean, really, it's a beautiful thing to have a great audience. Let's go to the calls. Tony, Silver Spring, Maryland, WMAL. Go right ahead.
Yeah, hi, Rich. Talked to you a couple times before. I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
You had mentioned how the left is trying to bring down ultimately the whole country, not just, just to bring down the whole country. Now, one of the kind of backdoor tactics that I'm seeing is a combination of social media and also even, I'm going to be specific, video games. And part of that is just by simply having the youth, and I'm talking about people 21 and younger, just be so saturated in this that they don't know pretty much anything else about what's going on in the world other than what they hear from people who are much cooler than I am. I'm not cool. I'm old. But the thing is, us people in my generation, we know not to be influenced by people like that. But the younger generation, their minds are still growing. And what's your opinion on all this?
Well, I'll tell you this, Tony. I think you're right, but I think there's always 2 ways to look at everything, right? So let's talk about this cool factor, right? There's a guy, I'm going to call him Donaldus Magnus, El Trompito, the 45th and 47th president of these United States. El Trompito, he did something remarkable that I thought was very wise, right? You had Kamala Harris. She did a podcast called Who's Your Daddy or something like that with a girl named Alex something or other. Really popular. She was Barstool. Very popular podcast. she did that, and apparently she paid them in order to do it, which was wild. But that's how that went. And that was like the only big podcast I feel that she did, because she didn't do a lot of media because they didn't want her really tested and seen. Now, President Trump took a totally opposite approach. He went on the biggest podcasts and radio shows you could find and went on all of them. And he made sure that he met with America, whether it was packing out stadiums all across this country to actually see them and be in the same room with them, or to get on the media with the cool people, right? The guys like Theo Vaughn and these other young influencers that have YouTube programs and whatnot in the millions. And this to me was a brilliant strategy of his. And I think he's credited his son Barron with the idea to do a lot of that. But it was brilliant nonetheless. And you're right. There are people that will only get their news from what they see on their social media and whatnot. So what do? You got to get onto the social media. And it's a simple answer, probably not very easily done, but because President Trump's so versatile, I think he was able to pull it off and do it effortlessly, right? There's not a lot of guests when you think about, doing this type of work we do that would play well in every medium, right? Whether it's a podcast with Joe Rogan, whether it's a radio show with a young person, an old person, a political show, a UFC show, a boxing show, sports show, Trump can get in on all of them, right? Because he's been in the game for a long time and he understands this stuff better than anybody I've seen. And just as an example, when he was on the program here with me, and I asked him a question, and I said, some of your critics say this stuff. It wasn't something I personally believed, but his answer was, he said, well, you have to ask tough questions, and it's tough. And he was talking about my job, right? He said it's tough in your position because if you ask a question that's too tough, the guest won't come back. And he said if you ask a question that's too soft, the audience won't listen anymore. So you've got to balance that. And he said, so I know it's not easy. And no guest has ever told me that because most guests don't understand the position that we're in doing this type of work. So I would say, I think that's the best answer I could give you is that you're right. Young people do need to get news somewhere. And hopefully they're responsible and hopefully they're, forward thinking and looking at content from guys like Charlie Kirk and others. And the ones that aren't, that's the opportunity. That's the opportunity for us to find more people. I've had a lot of people throughout the years, text me and say, hey, I want to send the segment you just did to my grandson. And they would, find a link to the program and text it to them because they know they would listen on a podcast, but they wouldn't tune in to talk radio. So I think you got to meet people where they are, Tony. Shout out to Silver Spring, Maryland, WMAL. I'll be right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. It's Rich Valdez, live and national, 8334-VALDEZ. We've got Paul calling us from Boise. Paul, what's going on? What do you think about the rare earth deal?
I think it's marvelous. Remember the problem we had with Greenland? Well, that seems to have been wiped out. I'm really happy to see that came through down there, down under. And, you kept getting the answers to the question I had to give to you when you were talking. And what you spoke about was really eloquent, and it was tasteful, and it was good. It made a lot of sense.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that.
The only trouble is we don't have enough time. But thank God, I got in with you, Rich.
Well, amen. And we'll get back to you. I just have to hit this pause. Amigos, we're coming right back in some places and others we're not. Take care, good night, and God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, and welcome back. We are here again, another hour, live and national, 7 minutes past the top of the hour. Truly a blessing to be here. Here's the phone number if you want to join me, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And I want to get into a bunch of the stuff that's going on today, right? News of the day, lots of interesting items. Anybody notice that the internet was a little bit slow yesterday and today? That's because there's this word they use. I believe the word internet outage is a euphemism for cyber hack from a country that hates us. And we're going to get into what that looks like because there's been a lot going on about this Amazon Web Service outage. And there was a very big deal with some international companies that had issues just a couple of months ago. So cyber attacks are cyber attacks, and I definitely want to talk about those. So we're going to get into that. I also want to talk about the latest with some of the Epstein fallout, right? Prince Andrew. I hear he's not a prince anymore. We're going to get into that a little bit later, and that's keep it locked right here for that because that should be interesting, right? When the royals, tell you you're not a royal. Now, I understand the one that married the American actress. I think that's Harry, right? I think he gave up his Prince Harryness too, right? I might be wrong, but I got to tell you, if I were a prince, I am not getting rid of that for anything. I'm telling everybody I'm a prince. I'm wearing my crown wherever I can wear it. I'm wearing the robe, whatever it is, whatever regalia that you get, I'm wearing it. Like, why are you dressed all funny? But I'm a prince, sir. I am a prince. I would. You know what else I would never hide from and wear on my sleeve? If I were a pilot. If I were a pilot, people, what's your name? I'm a pilot. What do you do? I'm a pilot. I would let everybody know. I'd have wings on everything. I'd have wings, I'd put the little wings on absolutely everything. That's such a cool gig. What a conversation started that is they go, oh, why are you wearing wings? Well, I'm a pilot. And that's it. Where does the conversation go from there? Nowhere but up, right? I mean, goodness, being a pilot's very cool. Never thought about becoming one, but if I were one, I think I would milk it with no end in sight. Anyway, so we're going to talk about a little bit of that, the royals and whatnot. But I also want to get into a couple of other things. Somewhere between now and the end of tonight's broadcast, I want to talk about an interesting new use for Botox. And believe it or not, how it's helping soldiers in Ukraine. Crazy story, but we're going to get into that. But first, I want to start with some of the big stories because, of course, we've heard about John Brennan being referred for criminal prosecution. That doesn't mean that he's indicted. It doesn't even mean the DOJ is going to take them up on it, but I would hope that they do. Right? If there was some malfeasance here, which I would presume there was, and not the ones that they're talking about, right? They're going to say he lied to Congress, he did this. That's fine. I'm sure he did all those things. I'm talking about how dirty he was with the dirty dossier. Remember all that? I remember all that. I remember how they did El Trompito dirty from candidate Trump, from Carter Page on. Spying on him, to spying on them, to grilling the children, to jailing Flynn. I mean, you name it. Trying to jail El Trompito? Bro, the amount of criminality that's gone down here, I mean, it's remarkable. Remarkable. So these guys should be thanking whoever it is that they thank for the fact that they are not looking at larger charges, heavier charges, because what they've done is probably along the lines of seditious conspiracy. I wouldn't say treason because I don't think it fits the statute from my understanding of it. But then again, I'm an armchair pseudo lawyer on the radio, right? I'm not a lawyer. I don't even get to play one on the radio. So anyway, I want to get into that in a little bit as well. But I also want to talk about a clip, right? There's a clip of audio that's been making its way around today. And it's of President Trump, who I think handled this situation extraordinarily well. And the candidate for mayor in the city of New York. Now, people wondering, Rich, why do you keep talking about that? Well, not only because I am from the city that never sleeps, even though I live in Jersey now, but also because I think this is a pivotal race. It's an important race, and not for the same reasons everybody else thinks. I think it's an important race because New York City actually has an opportunity right now to elect a conservative-leaning populist, right? Or I should say Republican populist, who's, hasn't been a Republican for very long. He's conservative on some issues, but quite moderate on others. I would take exception and on a lot of those issues. But he's not running for president. He's running for mayor in the city of New York. So those things have little bearing on the position that he's running for. But Curtis Sliwa is who I'm talking about. If you've ever listened to this program, he's been on this program before. He's a radio mentor of mine, along with the great one Mark Levin and John Batchelor. And these guys showed me an enormous amount of love when I came into the radio business. And Curtis Sliwa is truly a kind man, a man that is generous, a man that is thoughtful, a caring individual, really cares about people. And there aren't a ton of people like that, I got to tell you. I would say El Trompito is also one of those people. He's the type of person that when nobody's looking, will do the right thing 10x. Why? Because he believes in that stuff. He believes in doing the right thing. Raised right. Curtis Sliwa, same thing. While they're so different in personality, I'd say there's a lot of similarities between those two guys. In other ways, right? In terms of kindness, in terms of passion, in terms of being good at what they do. But I digress. The point I wanted to make here about Curtis was New York has an opportunity to elect a guy that truly is, in my opinion, the best option for them. Because he is New York in so many ways. He understands what it's like, not just because he takes the subway, but what you get from taking the subway. Right? When you ride the subway at different places, you see all sorts of things. You smell all sorts of things. You are a witness to a million different things. And that forms and shapes your worldview. I used to work in a studio on, 17 floors above Madison Square Garden, the world-famous WABC. And then it moved across town when it was sold. And now my studio is downtown, World Trade Center. But when I would jump on the subway for these different things, I can tell you that so many interesting stories came about. My show, especially my weekend show, would start with, so I was on the subway today and I saw. Now, I've kind of given up on going to the subway because it's easier for me to get to downtown from Jersey by car than it is by going into the city and public transportation. So I don't do the subway as much. Plus, after they set that lady on fire on the subway on Eric Adams' watch, the Democrats have truly failed New Yorkers. Who wants to ride the subways? But I will say this, that Curtis Sliwa being a subway rat, right? I feel like he's down there enough to be family with them. He's got this perspective on New York City that few others have. You top that off with him riding these trains as the leader of a safety patrol group, which is not just a neighborhood watch with 5 guys. I mean, you're talking about thousands of people in 120 countries. And I don't know what's going on, but I hear things in my ear. And in 120 countries and I think something like 40 states. Really just a massive organization. Helping people to stay safe. Coming alongside America's mayor, Rudy Giuliani, back in the 90s, to keep the city clean. Now, yes, he's a person that likes to embellish. He's someone that is funny and I would say a little cocky, full of himself. Sure, that's why he was. They tried to kill him, right? John Gotti got off on that charge, John Gotti Jr., but he was charged with the ordering the murder on Curtis Sliwa. So anyway, I brought all this up because I wanted to play a clip for you, 2 clips, one of El Trompito and one of Curtis Sliwa, and it's going to take me about a minute and a half to play each of those, but I want to very quickly play the cut of President Trump today in the Oval Office saying that he will not get involved with this race. He doesn't want to, but if he had a choice, he'd rather have a Democrat than get stuck with a communist. Listen to this. Number 11.
We have to win the midterms. Otherwise, all of the things that we've done, so many of them are going to be taken away by the radical left lunatics. I mean, we're going to end up with a communist mayor in New York. Can you believe it? A communist. Remember, I would always say, we will not have a socialist elected in our country. Remember, I'd say that all the time. And I was right. We skipped socialists. We got a communist elected. So I didn't tell a lie. I didn't tell a lie. I was right. We'll have a communist, not a socialist.
So that's President Trump. And again, repeating earlier today when he went back to the Oval Office, that he's not going to call for Sliwa to drop out, but he does believe if he did, that it would help the other guy. And that's common sense. I think that's true. Now, Curtis Sliwa responding to all of the calls, I think from 3 or 4 people that made big headlines in the last day or so. Listen to this, number 13.
So let's be very clear. I am not dropping out under no circumstance. I've already been offered money to drop out. I said no. Distant from that, there were threats against Nancy and myself. I now have to have armed security with me, former NYPD officers. Never had that in my life. And so now in this last minute, there's this push to get me to drop out. I was trained as a young boy, like many of you, that it's one person, one vote. I was never taught at PS 114 or Bill C. Junior High School in Canarsie that it's one person, one vote, but the billionaires end up picking who's going to be your mayor, and the political elite will make that determination. I trust the people.
Curtis Sliwa trusts the people, as do I. And I think it's one of the most important things we can do is allow elections to happen. The people have spoken. They've chosen the candidates they want. Andrew Cuomo was not one of the ones they chose, by the way. And we've got to let the chips fall where they may. May the best man win. Godspeed to them all. And again, was it a web outage or was it a cyber hack? All of that and more straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Take a look at all of these companies that, according to the Down Detector, experienced some sort of reported issues. There were 500 companies plus that were reporting some of these issues. 4 million plus outage reports. That's more than double what you usually tend to see reported on Down Detector. Again, I want to point out that a lot of these companies that said they were affected were now also saying that they've found a resolution, that things seem to be better. I think a lot of people are surprised. Wait, I thought Amazon just sells things on e-commerce. Well, AWS is their web hosting services. It's basically something that they offer to businesses to get their companies online. Now, what it came down to was some sort of what they call DNS resolution. Basically, it's just kind of big fancy talk for the way that when you type in an address in your URL, it gets translated up to the cloud services that Amazon basically contracts out to get all these things online.
All right, amigos, I am back. And again, that is a report that you heard on the Amazon Web Service outage yesterday. And I don't know why. Maybe I'm wearing too much of my tinfoil hat, but whenever I hear web outage, I tend to think it's a cyber hack from our enemies in Iran or China. And I want to get the scoop on this from Dr. Eric Cole. He was a cybersecurity commissioner in the Obama administration and a former CIA hacker who now runs the cybersecurity company Secure Anchor Consulting. Dr. Eric Cole, welcome back, sir.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. So am I off my rocker? Is this just a shortage, a web outage, or was there something nefarious going on here?
That's why I like talking to you, because you are always sharp and pick up on it. You are spot on. Amazon doesn't go down. I mean, Amazon has so much redundancy. They have so much built in. They do this testing day in and day out. They don't go down by accident. This was what we call a distributed denial of service attack, and they're trying to cover it up, because imagine if right now in this day and age they say that Amazon, one of the biggest companies, had a cyber attack, mass panic would set in. So what do? They come up with fancy buzzwords. DNS, replication server went down. That's not how it works. During these attacks, I checked the IP addresses directly, and the systems were still down. So this is definitely a cyber attack. The question is, how long will it take before the truth comes out?
Fascinating stuff here, Doc. And this is, I guess, kind of a conjecture, but who do we think did this? Is this foreign enemies of the United States? Is it somebody that Amazon may have pissed off? Do you think it's some geeky kid in his basement that said, "You messed up my order. I didn't get my Amazon Prime stuff"? Who are the usual suspects in this?
I mean, the usual suspects is, of course, nation-state attacks, and we could rattle through them. But this has China written all over it. If you just go and look at the last 5 days, in the last 5 days, the White House announced significant tariff increases from China. Yep. Then about 3 days ago, China announced that NSA was hacking its timing systems basically to throw off all of its defense and correlation systems. And then, of course, you have China knowing, which a lot of people don't, we're all focused on the government shutdown, but there's an Information Sharing Act that was passed 10 years ago in 2015 that expired 3 weeks ago, and Congress never renewed it because they were so focused on the budget, which basically means companies can't talk about cyber attacks without having massive liability. So if you put all this together, it's sort of the perfect storm that has China written all over it with the perfect cover-up, because right now, without the Information Sharing Act, if Amazon came out and said it was an attack, they could have liability and lawsuits against them.
Right. Wow. Lots to discuss there. We're going to unpack that a little more. Plus, I've been hearing about a couple of things that have been going on for the last month or so with a bunch of lost Land Rovers. So I want to get into that when we come back from the commercial break. But I want to remind everybody who we're talking to. Folks, we're on with Dr. Eric Cole. He was a cybersecurity commissioner in the Obama administration and former CIA hacker who now runs a company called Secure Anchor Consulting. And I agree with you, Doc. This is a pretty risky place for Amazon to be. If they come out and say, hey, look, this thing happened, they risk this panic. But I think the other side of it is if they come out and say, look, this happened, but this is what we had in place, and this is why we caught it, and this is why only a handful of our customers saw, a blip in the system. But maybe I'm being overly optimistic or overly honest, but I think it's always better to tell the truth and ask for forgiveness than to lie. But we'll get back to that on the other side of this. Folks, we're coming right back with Dr. Eric Cole. Like I said, he was in the Obama administration as a cybersecurity commissioner, and he was a CIA hacker back in the day. Now he runs a cyber tech company called Secure Anchor Consulting. Straight ahead, more to come on cyber hacking, the web threats, and all that stuff. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Big fan. Your impact is really big. Honored to be here.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So as of tonight, Amazon says that its systems are effectively back online despite some experiencing lingering problems with AWS. The issue first starting early this morning when a large spike on Down Detector began showing multiple different issues.
Hours after millions of users were left in the dark Monday, AWS calling the outage a DNS issue. Emory's Ramnath Chalapa explaining that's the service that translates human-readable internet addresses into machine-readable addresses.
When you type Amazon.com, it doesn't matter what name you use. What matters is the actual internet protocol number.
AWS is a cloud computing platform that provides IT resources like computing power and storage over the internet. And it's not small. Market research firm Gartner reporting last year, AWS accounted for 37% of the global market share, with some big-name customers like the NFL, Capital One, Disney, and the U.S. Army.
One small AWS glitch, and then the whole digital world needs a reboot.
The outage Monday affecting people and businesses across the world. According to CNET, Down Detector saw over 9.8 million reports, 2.7 million coming from the U.S. and 1.1 million from the U.K.
So, again, bringing everybody back up to speed on the outage that we saw that affected a lot of things, a lot of people. Some people couldn't access their banking. I tried to pay my cable bill, and I wasn't able to. Several things that were minimally functional for a little while, and then we came back. And I think it's because of the redundancy that Dr. Cole talked about that we were able to get back online quickly. But I'm not sure if I'm right about that, so I want to bring our guest back in. Dr. Eric Cole was a cybersecurity commissioner in the Obama administration and a former CIA hacker who now runs the cybersecurity company Secure Anchor. And Dr. Cole, with a situation like this where we suspect that it's China doing what they do for whatever purpose, right? Typically, these nation states, when they attack, they're not necessarily looking for ransom, are they? They're just looking to mess us up, to damage our infrastructure?
Exactly. And in a lot of cases, what they're actually doing is we're in the early stages of cyber war. They're actually testing and looking at capability. Like, for example, if somebody is going to rob a jewelry store, what do? They case out the joint and they see how long does it take the police to get there, right? We've seen in the movies, they go, okay, we have 3 minutes right before the police. That's all because they've done their reconnaissance. Because there wasn't significant damage, to me, this is what we call early reconnaissance attacks, where they're going in and saying, how vulnerable are we and how long did it take for us to recover? And what a lot of people don't realize is it took almost 10 hours. But because it happened in the middle of the night, we only felt a small amount in the U.S. in the morning when we were waking up. But what happened if this occurred at 10 in the morning and the entire day you were out without the internet? Just think of how big the impact could have been if the timing was different. That's why I think it was a test, because if they really want to do harm, they would have done it mid-morning, not middle of the night.
Right, and they could have done a lot worse. So what is, I guess, how do we recover here? Part A of my question is, how do guys that are in your job now, the guys that are in the White House, the guys that work for the Trump administration and the CIA and CISA and U.S. Cyber Command and all these other things, what are they doing? How can they prevent an attack like this or minimize it? And then B, or vice versa, you can answer whichever order you like. What does Amazon do to make sure they're getting back online and to protect themselves against something like this as well?
Yeah, so I'll take them in reverse order. So the big thing Amazon needs to do is increase redundancy across its data centers. This sort of hit home because I live in Ashburn, and this was one of the really large data centers in Ashburn. One data center was impacted, and it impacted almost 33% of all of the traffic, which means there was too much focus and infrastructure in one location. So if I was Amazon, they're actively working on how do they diversify so it's now across multiple data centers with higher failover, because they thought they had better failover rate. And the real message here is whether you believe it was a cyber attack or you think it was an accident, think of how quick and easy it took down the infrastructure, just how vulnerable we are. So they need to do a much better job at putting better redundancy. In terms of Congress and CISA, the first thing we need to do is get the government back up and running. Most people don't realize CISA, that's responsible for protecting our infrastructure, nuclear weapons, things like that, 65% of them have been furloughed, which means only 35% of the capable staff is actually monitoring and tracking our systems. And then the second thing that Congress has to do is make these systems critical infrastructure, because critical infrastructure like electricity and water, they have a lot more protections, a lot more regulations, and a lot more testing and control. And here you have a company like Amazon that's running all of our banking, all of these critical systems, yet they don't have any regulations or requirements to have the protection in place because they're not deemed critical infrastructure. So we just have to recognize the web is how we live, and it's part of critical infrastructure. We need to start passing better laws to protect us and secure us.
Interesting stuff. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit and ask you about this situation with Land Rover. It's been going on for over a month. I know they lost some cargo ships. I think there's a company looking for ransom. Talk to us. What do you know about it? What can you tell us?
Yes, so this is more of the classic cyber attack that we see, where they go in, they take control of someone's systems, in this case Land Rover, and they initially say, you need to pay. Usually with a company like Land Rover, they're going to ask somewhere about $5 to $10 million in ransom, and the company says, no, we don't think you really have control. So what do? They start impacting them. They start saying, okay, we're going to go in and cause some monetary damage, lose some trucks and do things like that. Are you now going to pay the ransom? And most likely it's going to happen what happened with Colonial Pipeline, where they have no choice but to pay the ransom, because the amount of damage the attackers are going to cause versus what they're going to pay in the ransom is going to far outweigh. Because if they can go in and lose a couple of cars, they could lose an entire ship. They could cause more damage. They can actually go in and start having cars potentially crash. So it's one of those where they're calling their bluff. And unfortunately, Land Rover is probably going to have to pay the ransom relatively soon.
Wow. Now, I heard that they were trying to quickly build a parallel infrastructure so they could abandon the one that was compromised. How realistic is that?
In the long term, it's very realistic. In the short term, not so much. And what the problem they're really getting at is, in the United States, because we built the internet, right? Go back to the 60s and 70s. The joke is, when Al Gore says he created the internet, and it's because he funded it. Like he did pass a bill to fund it, but the United States built the internet. So the problem is the foundational infrastructure of the internet and the United States are one and the same. So when we have a cyber attack, we can't protect ourselves. Russia, they disconnect from the internet twice a year to prove that they can protect themselves from cyber war. So if we start attacking Russia, they can disconnect. Iran, when they started having the conflict with Israel, they disconnected from the internet for over 3 weeks to protect. Exactly, from cyber attacks. We can't do that. So what they're talking about, which is something we've been recommending for a long time, and I'm glad people are listening, we need to have a separate internet for the backbone and then an internet for the United States so we can isolate and protect. But this is going to take years, not days, weeks, or months.
Wow. So overall, Land Rover has to capitulate. Otherwise, these ships and tankers and things that are containing their inventory, they continue to get screwed.
I hate to say that because I'm definitely in the camp where we don't like to encourage this activity. But unfortunately, when they have the upper hand from a business standpoint, that's their only option.
Right. Wow. Dr. Eric Cole, always a fascinating conversation. What should we be on the lookout? What's next in the big, in the big arena of cybersecurity?
The big thing is really just a lot more of these attacks against individuals, bank accounts, and others. So big recommendation is if you're not using two-factor authentication, definitely need to use that. You also want to go in, and most people don't realize this, download and back up your financial information. Most people keep all their financial information with the bank, and if the bank has a problem, they have no proof of their account. So it's good to go in the next time you log into your bank online, just go and download a local copy of all your account information. So this way you have a record of it just in case there's a larger problem.
Outstanding advice. Dr. Eric Cole, thank you for being with us, CEO of Secure Anchor Consulting. Let everybody know how they can follow you online and how they can learn more about Secure Anchor.
On almost all social media, I'm Dr. Eric Cole, DrEriccole, and I give away a lot of free information. And then you can also go to drericcole.com or secure-anchor.com.
Outstanding, amigos. Make sure you check him out. I'm about to give him a follow. You should too. Dr. Eric Cole, thanks for being here, sir.
My pleasure, and thank you.
You bet. God bless. And amigos, we're coming back with your thoughts, calls, and reactions. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
I want to say to you that I really appreciate what you're doing for people and their state of mind and their viewpoints on the airwaves every night. I really do appreciate it.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. And earlier I was talking about something, and I want to circle back to it, which is we're talking about this leftist rot, this decay on the American spirit, if you will. And I use this language, I guess it's a little, I don't want to say hyperbolic, but a little dramatic, right? Because I'm trying to convey a point. One, because I'm on radio, and, you could use simpler words when you're on TV. People see your face and your hands and all the movement. But when you're on the radio, you got to make it a little extra. But I don't think it's extra in this case. I really think that we live in a country where we got away from so many issues, and we've made those issues anew. I mean, for example, we had slavery. We got away from slavery. We did really good. And then we started going back in the other direction. And I don't even mean racism. I just mean putting black people in bondage again. FDR, for example, right? The welfare reforms. You've got to be, in my opinion, a special type of stupid to think that a lot of the things that happened to blacks in history weren't on purpose. Of course they were on purpose, right? When FDR created this rule, and the Democrats that largely were very racist, very, very racist people, they made sure that they suppressed these people, oppressed, right? The systemic oppression. I shouldn't say suppressed. I'm thinking of suppressors, NRA stuff. But they oppressed these people, and it was built into the Democrat platform, and it remains there until recently, where we're trying to get away from it, thanks to I would say in large part the MAGA movement, where you have a lot of people saying, "No, I'm not doing that anymore." I mean, it's always been surprising to me when you go into a failing school system, whether it be, I'll use the ones in New Jersey because I know them best. I spent some time working for the state in New Jersey, so I looked at a lot of that stuff. At the time, not anymore, but Elizabeth was once in bad shape. Newark, New Jersey was under state control at one point. Camden, New Jersey. All of these districts have superintendents that were Democrats. And it was just shocking to me. It's like, hold on a second. Do you guys profit from this? And then you start to see how it works. And these are all people that deal with teachers' unions. And the system was always more important than the child and the educational outcome. And that's why for a long, long time, a place like Newark, New Jersey, great town, great people, but one of the highest costs per pupil, right, to educate a student in America. At one point, it was the highest in the world some years ago. And I thought to myself, well, why? What is the reason? And when you see how many administrators live good, and there was a documentary some years back called The Cartel, and it highlighted how people in the education establishment, public school educators, were living so good. And the most remarkable scene from that doc was when the narrator goes into the parking lot at several school districts, like, where the superintendent and their staff work. And he was just showing Lexus, BMW, Mercedes. And he was making the point that they had the nicest cars. The teachers didn't have the nicest cars, but all the administrators did. And of course, they all made $180K, $150K. And this is, 15 years ago. They were doing very, very well for themselves. And yet all the students weren't doing well for themselves. And it made me realize we've got a problem here, Houston. So in the same way, I say, we've got a problem with Democrats, and not specifically all the Democrats, but the most left-leaning ones. Now, yesterday, Karine Jean-Pierre, KJP, remember her? Joe Biden's press secretary. She was on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. And this is a doozy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pause. Let me see. Where should I do it? Do I have time to play it here? It's a minute 20, Mr. Good? All right. So I will play it here, and then we'll have time for a quick caller reaction as well. Listen to this, cut 12.
Let's talk about the Democrats who are getting people excited, like Bernie Sanders gets people excited. He's a Democratic socialist. Okay, AOC.
He's an independent.
AOC, she's a Democratic socialist. Zoran Mamdani, Democratic socialist.
Yeah.
Doesn't that say that there are fundamental needs of the working class in America that are not being addressed by either party? And if they don't change their ways, they're going to cut themselves off at the knees by toting to special interest and corporations.
I totally agree.
Okay, go ahead. You agree? I'm not going to.
You're speaking.
I accept your apology.
You're speaking my language. No. Here's the thing. The Democratic Party needs to be a big tent party, the big tent party that I loved and appreciated and felt seen in. And what's happening, you just mentioned three people who are, Democratic socialists, independents, who are very much exciting people. But what's happening with the leadership, more of the leadership Democratic Party side of things, they're actually throwing people under the bus who are vulnerable and need protection. As a black woman who has walked through the walls of the White House and been part of this party for a very long time, I believe, and this is my personal opinion, that we get forgotten and that by large part the Democratic Party does not see us.
I mean, if it's not your personal opinion, whose opinion is it going to be? It's not like you still work for the White House. Wow. Anyway, talk about unnecessary words. The key of this clip for me was the term working class. This term working class is not one that I invented. I would give direct credit to Karl Marx, but I know the term he used was proletariat, which meant working class, industrial class, right? People that sold their labor for wages. But it's attributed to Malachi Postlethwaite back in the 1700s. But this truly comes from Marx and the proletariat, right? That's why we're using this word today, the working class. We shouldn't be in adherence with a class structure that resembles what Marx taught. But this is, even Stephen Colbert is bought in on this. And this is, to me, the reason we have this decay that I've been talking about. I'll be right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. And I want to get to your calls, your thoughts, your opinions, but the clock is a cruel taskmaster, as the late Jim Bohannon used to say. So I'm going to invite you all to give us a call at 833-482-5337 and hang on for a couple of minutes. Get to a couple of commercials that we've got to get to, and then we're coming right back. In some areas, we might be switching, time zones and whatnot, but this show will continue for another hour. So if your station isn't carrying the coveted third hour of the program, make sure you ask them to do that. Don't go anywhere, folks. I'm Rich Valdez. Coming right back.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Tuesday night edition of the program. We continue the program live and national, 7 minutes past the top of the hour. Happy, blessed, fortunate to be here with you guys. We're live, so you can call me, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. If you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation, I encourage you to do it. I'm looking forward to chatting with you guys. And just to set the stage here for our conversation tonight, we're talking about a number of things. And we talked about the cyber threat, the cover-up of the AWS, Amazon Web Service, being an actual cyber attack. More on that in a little bit. Plus, we've talked about, and we're going to talk a little bit more about, a number of things, not the least of which is the New York City mayor's race. Near and dear to my heart, right? I love New York. And I'm going to say this. I was watching the Epic Times TV news, right? It's called NTD, right? Tang Dynasty, NTD News, Epic Times. Many of you read the newspaper, great publication. Shout out to everybody at the Epic Times. And they have on their news program, they had two people on. They had a Democrat strategist, the guy who ran for Congress in New York, a Democrat named George Carrillo, and a conservative who is the president of the American Principles Project, a guy named Terry Schilling. Now, Terry's been on our show lots of times, a solid conservative. He often says that he represents big family, right? Not big pharma, not big business, not big tobacco, but big family. And I love that. And Terry Schilling and George Carrillo were on NTD News, and they were talking about the New York City mayor's race and all the handful of people that are asking Curtis Sliwa to step aside so that he can give this election over, being the only Republican in the race, give it to a Democrat to win. And the conversation was fascinating. I have a clip of it. It's probably about a 15-minute conversation they had, this panel discussion. But I want to play you a clip of what I've got. Listen to this.
Cuomo was governor of New York. I don't think it's guaranteed that every single, supporter of Curtis Sliwa would jump over to support Cuomo right away because he's a Democrat. And as a governor of New York, he was a left-wing progressive Democrat. There's no hiding that. He's more moderate than Zohran Mamdani, but that's not saying very much because Mamdani is an extremist and he's a radical across the spectrum. So look, I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon and say that Curtis Sliwa needs to drop out to save New York City. I actually don't think it would have that big of an impact because Cuomo is not appealing to people who are supporting Curtis Sliwa.
George, you think this is Mom?
Now, I just want to jump in here, and I want to say this. I agree with Terry Schilling here. Terry Schilling's right. There are a bunch of people, many, many, many New Yorkers. The reason that this is one of many reasons, right? You couldn't have picked a worse person to try and give this coronation to, this Kamala Harris-styled run as an independent and just claim the other guy is so bad that we have to swallow this poison pill, Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo was horrible. He was horrible. I mean, he's proven to be horrible. Right now, today, Andrew Cuomo has done more harm for New York than Mamdani has. And that's not an endorsement of Mamdani, but it's the truth. Mamdani is a small fry assemblyman who's running for mayor, and he's got some good numbers in these fabricated polls, in my opinion. Andrew Cuomo has a trail of bodies behind him. A trail of bodies. He signed the no-cash bail law. There are so many people that cannot stand this man. And to think that all of a sudden he's the best thing since sliced bread, no, this is a mistake. It's a huge mistake. Go ahead.
Donnie's to lose, or you could see some potential twists in the tail?
So I think that this is going to be a little bit complicated simply because you're right. Cuomo is a Democrat. He's running as an independent. What is that going to do to the voter dynamic? There's many people that are in the middle. You know, they're undecided. They're not Democrats nor Republicans. Who are they going to go to? I think in a 3-person race, who is it going to affect? I think it's going to affect the 2 Democratic candidates because they might split the vote. Even though I don't believe that Sliwa has that will win, but this could be a major upset if he stays in the race because of the fact that the 2 Democrats might split the vote, and he might be able to actually sneak in and win this election. Anything's possible.
That, again, George Carrillo, the Democrat on that panel. So you've got Terry Schilling weighing in, saying that he's not jumping on the bandwagon and he doesn't think that a lot of the Sliwa supporters would cross over. His analysis is right, in my opinion. I think he's got his gut check is accurate. Then you have the Democrat weighing in, saying, look, this is not signed, sealed, and delivered for Mamdani. Because you may have Democrats canceling each other out. And this has always been the strategy. This is what many pundits have said, that the best chance of a Republican winning is in this crowded field. And this is where I think it gets dicey. In a 3-way race, you're talking about a handful of points is going to win this race. A handful, right? So whoever gets the plurality here, doesn't matter what that plurality is. Honestly, Curtis stood better chances with Adams in the race. Because then it would have had 3 Democrats diluting the Democrat vote and Curtis being the only alternative. And people, for whatever reason, why doesn't somebody commission a poll on that? I'm sure people would be real interested in knowing it. Why? Because they don't want you to know those numbers. It's like the fix is in. We want to make sure New York City goes in the crapper for whatever reason. Not on my watch. Can't do it in good conscience. But Godspeed to everybody involved, right? May the best man win. And the best man, in my opinion, Curtis Sliwa. Now, I want to move on to some international stuff. And I'm going to put on my British accent a little bit here because, my friends, we're going to talk about Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew losing his title of prince. Others are saying he's abandoning the title. I don't know. But it sounds like he's been banished, in my opinion. And we're going to learn more about that when we return. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Prince Andrew further embroiled in scandal this morning, with detectives looking into claims he asked his police protection officer to investigate Virginia Giuffre. The Mail on Sunday publishing emails they say are from Andrew to an aide of the late Queen Elizabeth. I have given her date of birth and social security number for investigation with XXX, the on-duty personal protection officer. The paper saying these emails come from the Epstein files and that the prince was asking for Giuffre to be looked into before a photo of them together was to be published. Andrew's friendship with Epstein seemingly lasting longer than Andrews claimed. Recently released emails appearing to show that the prince wrote to Epstein in 2011 saying, "We'll play together soon," months after he said he'd cut off all contact. Just days ago, the disgraced royal and his wife Sarah Ferguson announcing they'd be giving up their Duke and Duchess titles. In a statement, Andrew saying, "The continued accusations about me distract from the work of His Majesty and the royal family." The King and Prince William taking action after those accusations resurfaced with the publication of Virginia Giuffre's memoir, in which she claims the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein trafficked her to have sex with Andrew when she was 17.
He knows exactly what he's done.
Virginia Giuffre took her own life last year, but her book will be released posthumously tomorrow. In it, she describes 3 alleged sexual encounters with the prince, calling Andrew entitled, describing the moment they first met when Andrew guessed her age, 17. Andrew has always denied the accusations.
All right, so that's the latest on Prince Andrew, and it seems like what I surmised from this was accurate. This guy's in over his head. He's probably guilty as sin, allegedly, and now the royal family doesn't want to be embarrassed anymore by these shenanigans. So they said, you know what? you're not allowed to be a royal anymore. Now, maybe I'm being too harsh in my analysis. We're going to find out if I'm right or wrong, and we're going to find out from somebody who knows what's going on. He's a retired lawyer, as well as a strategist and former speechwriter to the Iron Lady, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher of the United Kingdom. Jeff Gilson, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Rich, for having me on the show. Happy to be here.
Pleasure. Thank you. Well, give me the scoop here. I mean, I know you're in the know on some of these things. Am I right? Did they say, hey, listen, bro, give up the crown jewels because you can't be one of us anymore?
Well, it's almost. I mean, basically there's three things going on here, Rich, and you know that. First of all, it's Virginia Giuffre and her memoir coming out. It's either come out or it's coming out tomorrow. I'm getting my copy tomorrow. And while we talk about the other matters, which we ought to talk about, I don't think anyone should forget that this is a human tragedy.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to get into theories about whether she committed suicide or not. That actually is, I think, a disgrace to her memory. The fact is, she died. She was left considerably disturbed by what happened to her when she was a teenager, and we should never forget that. The second thing is what is true and what is not true about Prince Andrew. And the third thing, and this is where my book, Maggie's Hammer, comes in, is there something else going on here beyond just the friendship and possible political blackmail? Right. We've dealt with Virginia Giuffre. That is a human tragedy. Is what you say about Prince Andrew true? Pretty much. We can say what we like because the royal family isn't going to sue you or sue me. They want this to go away. The British public is still very much behind the royal family. That's developed over the years. They are not behind Prince Andrew. A deal was struck several years ago with the U.S. law enforcement authorities who visited England. The Americans left unhappy. The royal family were left unhappy. If he has not been a member of the royal family, there is absolutely no doubt Prince Andrew would have been arrested, extradited, removed to America, and charged with exactly the same offenses as Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. He was a recipient of sexual favors with a teenager who was trafficked. There is absolutely no doubt about that. I'm absolutely certain that Virginia Giuffre's book is going to say enough personally about Prince Andrew to make that absolutely the case. And besides which, everything that Prince Andrew has done bespeaks his guilt. The payoff made in 2022, the deal that the royal family came to with the U.S. law enforcement authorities. The United States wanted house arrest in Windsor Castle, literally. The royal family said no, but he will not be allowed ever to leave the country, and he will be stripped of his privileges and his associations with charities and so on. That's been taken a step further, and he's now voluntarily given up, if you want to put that in inverted commas, his last remaining royal title, Duke of York. He will still be called Prince. There's a reason for that, because if you take away the Prince, the deal with the U.S. legal authorities falls, because the only reason he's not being arrested is because he's a royal. So he will still be allowed to be called Prince, but that's cover. The royal family are embarrassed, and even though he says it's been given up, he's been tossed by them at the press as a sacrificial lamb. And that's important because it doesn't end with Prince Andrew.
That was my next question. I was going to say, when you said sacrificial lamb, I thought, what? That means that there's more and they're trying to make it go away. And that's interesting. If we pull on that thread, where does it go, Jeff?
Well, it doesn't necessarily go anymore to Epstein. And this is a very, very unfortunate thing to have to say. And I'm going to mention my book, Maggie's Hammer, Rich, if I may.
Oh, yes.
What that book does is it investigates the death of a friend of mine, my political mentor, a rising star in the British Conservative Party, a guy called Hugh Simmons, who turned up dead, mysteriously, in some woods in 1988. And he was linked to all sorts of elite networks in Great Britain, essentially associated with arms dealing and money laundering, but other networks as well, which lead all the way up to various scandals at the moment. Epstein, Russiagate, even the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Those networks have never gone away. Important book to read, but the point is, it's not just Prince Andrew. one of the things that I investigated in trying to understand Hugh's death was all of the secret networks that exist in England, everything from Freemasons to the Royals. And I will tell you, Rich, one of the things that most journalists in America are missing out on in trying to understand why Prince Andrew is protected is the fact that the royal family is high in the echelons of Freemasonry in Great Britain. Almost since the 700s, all of the Grand Masters of the United Grand Lodge of England have been senior members of the royal family. All of the current members of the royal family, with the exception possibly of Diana's children, are senior Freemasons, and people miss that. That's one of the reasons he is still free. But I examined those networks, and for those of your listeners who watched Downton Abbey and The Crown, it's nowhere near the whole story. These secret royal and aristocratic elites in Great Britain have for centuries engaged in sexual deviation. It's a horrible fact of life, Rich, but whenever you find rich people and powerful people in concert, they give themselves permission to do the most awful things. Now, whether that's running a country or selling arms or engaging in child abuse, it always seems to be connected. And it isn't just Epstein, it's other networks as well. And this is true in Great Britain. And I have heard firsthand horrible stories going back decades of people who go on country weekends to aristocratic families, and parents are simply shopping their children out to their friends for sex. So what Andrew was involved in is something that was very common for him. The deal is, though, it's always been behind closed doors. What the Queen tried to do, Queen Elizabeth, was introduce her children to the real world, but they weren't ready for it. Andrew was not one of the brightest bulbs on the Christmas tree. He's actually quite dim. And I'm not excusing this, I'm explaining it. He went out into the big world with his title and with his money, and the rich royal family is very rich. And he meets up with other rich people like Epstein, and he discovers, lo and behold, they do the same thing on the weekend as well. And he has never seen that what he did was wrong.
Right, because it was kind of a business as usual. Jeff Gilson, I want to pause right here.
Business as usual.
And come right back to explore your book a little bit. We have to take a pause here. But yes, you're right. Business as usual for the elite with power that don't work and are born rich. Fascinating concept. I don't know anything about it, but it sounds like an interesting life. Folks, we're coming right back with Jeff Gilson. He's a retired lawyer and former speechwriter to Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher of England. Keep it locked right here on Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere.
Oh, my liberty-loving Latino.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our conversation with Jeff Gilson. He is the author of Maggie's Hammer, investigating the mysterious netherworld. And I want to talk about this because, you know, we started our conversation around Prince Andrew voluntarily, quote unquote, releasing his royal status, but maintaining his prince title, even if it's in name only, to protect him for this deal that was made so that he wouldn't go to jail and be extradited and charged with his crimes in the United States. And it opens the door to a larger conversation where Jeff Gilson outlines in his book about the royal family and the aristocracy being very involved in Freemasonry and other rich elite activities that tend to be awful in nature. And, you know, we've heard about this for a long time. And I think oftentimes you hear things so often you think that they may not be real until you actually see things like this where you say, man, this is crazy. And this is not just the royal family. You've got in the United States this Rubin person that we talked about yesterday who decided to not only abuse these women that he was having sex with, but he would torture them and then kept a trophy system about everybody that he tortured. Just really crazy stuff, and had his own kind of Ghislaine Maxwell helping him to find these women. Some people are into very sordid, cruel things. And I want to bring Jeff Gilson back into the conversation so he could tell us more about his book and pick up where we left off. We left off with saying this for Prince Andrew and many in those circles, this was business as usual. Jeff Gilson.
Thank you, Rich. But we'll see this. When I finally published Maggie's Hammer, I didn't end up where I started. I didn't intend to end up where I did. What I was trying to do was work out why my political mentor, another speechwriter for Margaret Thatcher, rising star in the British Conservative Party, turned up dead in the woods in 1988. It didn't make sense to me. I explain that in the book. But I went out and asked, to put it bluntly, Rich, all the right questions in all the wrong places. Found myself embroiled for 2 years in all sorts of intelligence intrigue and high political hijinks all around the world, just conducting first-hand interviews with people, literally calling them up, turning up on the doorstep and saying, what was this all about? What I ended up doing was painting a picture in the 80s arising out of the Iran-Iraq war and illegal arms sales, 60 billion to Iraq, 80 billion to Iran, Iran-Contra, all of which, unknown probably to most of your listeners, centered on London. Not all of the North, centered on London, Israeli intelligence and corrupt Western agencies operating together and operating through the city of London, where you could pretty much do anything financially. Right. I discovered that my political mentor, Hugh Simmons, was a gentleman who laundered the money from the arms deals back into major political parties in Great Britain, to the CIA, to Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, and others. And there I thought the story would end. But I have followed the networks and the people and the money through the decades, and they still haunt all of the major scandals that appear. The particular one in question is Epstein. Now, Epstein engaged in reprehensible sexual activity, as did Prince Andrew. Political blackmail was involved, but that isn't where Epstein got his start. He got his start in the 80s in London. My investigations show no connection between him and Hugh, but they were doing the same thing with the same groups of people, dealing with illegal arms and laundering money. That's what happened in the 80s. That's when Epstein met with Robert Maxwell. He met Ghislaine through Robert Maxwell, a British billionaire and arms dealer. Long before he met Ghislaine, that's where he met Ari Ben-Menashe, the primary Israeli intelligence informant for my book, and who has written his own book.
Now, let me ask you a question, Jeff. If people want to get a copy of the book and learn more about everything that you're talking about, where do they go and how do they get a copy?
Very simple. Maggie's, as in Maggies, Hammer. If you Google Maggie's Hammer and my name, Jeff Gilson, Jeff spelled in the English way, Geoff, you will find a way to buy the book, and I'd be delighted if you buy it.
Is there a website or a social media account that people can follow you on?
Yes. MaggiesHammer.org is about the book, and I update the book on my Facebook page, which is Jeff Gilson.
Outstanding. Well, I don't want to give everything away. It's such an enthralling conversation. But Jeff Gilson, again, MaggiesHammer.org, MaggiesHammer.org. Sounds like an incredible thriller. Really, really does. So far, it sounds like a movie. And that's, part of what I think is so interesting about this. If people want to get the book, you go to MaggiesHammer.org. Jeff Gilson, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I do appreciate it. I have to take a pause here, but Godspeed to you, sir, and we'll do it again real soon.
Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. And amigos, coming up right now, your thoughts, your calls, your reactions. Open Phone America. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now 833-4Valdez. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4Valdez. That's Valdez with an S. Call now 833-4Valdez. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4Valdez. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back to the phones we go. It's Rich Valdez, by the way, keeping you company all night long. 833-4Valdez. I want to go to Sam in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Has been very kindly waiting online. The oldest radio station in America, KDKA. Go right ahead, Sam.
Hi. Yeah. So I think that when it comes to certain things regarding the shutdown, I'm wondering what. I'm sorry. Hang on a second. When it comes to some the topic of working class people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about them working and eventually working towards getting a pension or getting some of the things that they're entitled to, right? They're entitled to these things. They put money into these things, and they're entitled to these things, right? I'm wondering why then there's certain circumstances where a country like Israel gets tons and tons of money from us, and now it's become an entitlement where they feel like, no, you need to give us that money, and you're going to do it because we have lobbyists left and right that will either destroy
I'll tell you. This, Sam. I don't think it's that deep. I would say, look, if I wanted to fight with somebody or somebody was constantly threatening me, in this case, Iran, saying death to America, and I knew I had an attack dog right near them in the Middle East named Israel, I'd send them money too, right? Why would I do all the fighting myself when I have a great fighting force in the IDF and a tremendous ally in Netanyahu? Let's do it, right? It makes all the sense in the world for me to say, hey, look, you're my ally in that area. You're holding it down over here. And this way I don't have to quote unquote, get my hands dirty. So to me, that's how that works. I mean, everything is about influence and power. If there was no need for us to use Israel, there wouldn't be a partnership. But there is. And it's not just security. I think, there's intelligence sharing. They are an incredible hub for the creation of technology, and as well as even some pharma. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of good that comes out of there in terms of just the generation of products where, outside of the United States, you don't see a whole lot of that coming out of the Middle East. So it's a valuable ally, in my opinion.
Is there something can I say something?
Of course.
No intelligence that Israel has given us has helped us. The only intelligence that they've given to us has resulted in us being at war. That's why we went to war with Iraq, because Israel gave us the so-called intelligence that resulted in us going to war in Iraq.
All right. When it comes to intelligence, hang on. When it comes to intelligence, I don't know. Hang on a second. I don't know that we're going to know everything that they share with us. But I think even if you ask spies who don't like Israel, I think they'll tell you the Mossad is a very good intelligence outfit. They're good at what they do. So I think, again, good. It's a benefit to have them on board. Now, there really isn't a debate, right? Whether it's a Democrat administration or a Republican administration, Israel has been an ally. Even Obama, who couldn't stand Israel, he tried to sabotage them during their elections. Even him he didn't. He went as far as he did, but that didn't sever the ties that we have. So, I mean, when we talk about pensions and you jump to Israel, it's quite bizarre, in my opinion. But oftentimes, Jew hatred will mess up people's minds. But ultimately, to answer your questions, or at least to respond to your statements, those are my thoughts. I think that it's well worth it to have an ally like Israel. It's well worth it to have an ally like Argentina. When you're in the midst of people that are leaning in a different direction, that are contrary to the values that you espouse in your country, you want to build those alliances. It's survival of the fittest at its core. I think that's the simplest way I can put it. Sam in Pittsburgh, thanks for your call. KDKA in the building. We continue. Where do I want to go? I want to go to Carrollton, Ohio, WNIR. Let's check in with Al. Al, go right ahead.
Well, hello there, Rich. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir.
I was really originally going to be talking about, New York and how they're really going to get the type of a mayor that they deserve.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think America got... Stop. Do you think America got the president they deserved in 2020?
No, but...
Well, then you can't make a statement and say that New Yorkers are going to get the type of mayor they deserve, because there are New Yorkers like Donald Trump, like Rudy Giuliani, like Sean Hannity, like me, like so many of us that love America and want to see the things that are done well. Now, if we're outnumbered by people that have jobs in the teachers union and lean in the other direction, it doesn't mean that everybody should have to pay the price, but that is how politics works. So, I never appreciate this analogy of people get whatever they deserve. No, there's a lot of people who don't deserve to be under leftist rule. And none of us America did not deserve the damage that was done during the Biden administration, but for California and these big left wing cities and all of their electoral votes. So, again, and not to mention all of the chicanery that went on. That's really the bigger issue there. So I think that's my my initial reaction to that. With respect to the New York City mayor's race, same thing. You've got great places like Staten Island. You've got New York as a whole, probably rather red and conservative state. But because you've got Queens, because you've got Brooklyn, you've got these hot spots that are so deeply blue with so many people that it offsets the entire rest of the state. So I think, again, the candidate with the most appeal here that can draw from the Democrats is Curtis Sliwa. There are Democrats that'll vote for him. You're not going to find that many Republicans, or at least I should say conservatives, that are going to vote for Andrew Cuomo. Some might, out of pure loyalty to President Trump, who seems to favor Andrew Cuomo. I think that's a mistake. I think everybody should be putting their energy against Cuomo, against Mamdani, and for Sliwa. And the time to get behind Sliwa has come and gone for a lot of us. Maybe some people will, some people won't, but now it's in the hands of the people. And one thing I think none of us should agree with is encouraging the people to abandon their right to vote for their candidate. That's something we shouldn't do. Thank you, Al, for your call. WNIR in the building. Going to keep it moving. Speed round. I want to make sure we get as many people on as we can. Let's go to Robert, Phoenix, Arizona, KFNX. Go right ahead, sir.
How you doing tonight, Rich?
Wonderful, thank you.
Fantastic. Hey, you always put a spark underneath me, and I blast to the moon. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. What's on your mind?
I want to talk about everybody's talking. Well, not everybody. Anyways, the cruise missiles. It's a long-range missile. It's basically a water-based system. It's not a game changer. What we need to do is give them tanks.
Yeah, well, I would say at this stage of the game, they likely do need that, because this incursion is now very much on land that was already, being debated and whatnot, like the Donbass region and whatnot. Earlier on, when the conversation started, I'd say 3 years ago, that was the case, right? They said we were getting pummeled by the Russian Air Force, and we need to be able to fight those people. Since then, I think Poland has come through with some F-35s, and they've gotten some Tomahawk missiles, and they've been able to defend themselves from the ground. I agree with you. Now it's men and it's infantry. This is a ground game, and my hope is that this thing comes to an end. I know President Trump's been doing a really good job trying to kind of isolate Russia's options and hit them financially and in other areas, but they're stubborn. They're stubborn, and they're determined to wipe out Ukraine, or at least to take back the land that was once theirs a million years ago. So we'll see what happens here. But, Robert, thanks for your kind words. I appreciate it. KFNX in the building. I'm going to pause right here. Coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, we're back. Amigos, Rich Valdez, keeping you company for a little while longer. 833-4-VALDEZ. I'm going to go to Walter, St. Augustine, Florida, WFOY. Go right ahead, sir.
Buenos, Rich. What a sad front page today of the New York Post reading, just walk away, beret. Rich, can you explain to me why Mamdani can be so favored to win? Probably no one in NYPD or their families will vote for him. And I was a doorman like your dad. So the Upper East Side, are they really going to vote for a madman who could send the city into bankruptcy and destroy public safety? Rich?
Walter, I'll tell you this. It's a good assessment, and I know you're a New Yorker by way of Florida right now. I spend my time around New York City. I know there are pockets, but I got to tell you, I am not finding any enthusiasm for this guy. The fact that he did good in the primary, to me, is only indicative of one thing. He was running against two huge losers. The current mayor, Eric Adams, who was an abysmal disaster, and Andrew Cuomo, who's a bigger loser than Eric Adams. So they said, you know what, let's give this young guy a shot. He smiles a lot. He keeps talking about affordability. He gets in, right, with big numbers because it's a referendum on those losers. Somehow people aren't realizing Cuomo is the issue here. He's the reason Mamdani is doing as well as he has. Now, Mamdani's not really that popular. This is not a congressional race. This is a citywide mayoral race. If there was no Cuomo, and it's funny how the AARP thing comes out and it says, if there were no Sliwa, why wouldn't they have done it both ways and said, if there's no Cuomo? Now, no Cuomo. The reason they're going to say is, because he's polling so low. But the reality is Sliwa's within striking distance of Cuomo. And if this were a head-on race, I think Curtis Sliwa beats him. And tomorrow, everybody's going to see the performance that Curtis does. Cuomo's going to step up his game to try and do a little better, to show that he has some experience. Hopefully, he can hold it together and do a decent job in tomorrow's debate. He did a horrible job last time. Curtis Sliwa wiped the floor with both of them. And I expect to see more of that tomorrow. I think Cuomo might bring his A game a little bit better because, all the pressure is on right now. But you're right. The cops aren't supporting him. He's got some union support because the unions are sold out for the Democrats. And that's it. And that's a lot in New York City. But it's, in my opinion, it doesn't have to be enough, right? There's definitely a shot here. That's it. Bottom line, right? Rudy won the same way. He won after he lost twice. Sometimes that's what it takes in New York City. Amigos, hasta la próxima. Take care. Good night. God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.